A young perspective on hot-button issues around the world. This is The Hub.
Hello everyone, welcome to this special edition of The Hub on CGTN. I'm Wang Jiyuan in Beijing. We are at the site of the International Forum of the Overseas Studies on Xi Jinping Thought on Socialism with Chinese Characteristics for a New Era, Changes Unseen in the Century, and the Governance of China. This is a turbulent time, with people around the world asking the same question. How should we pursue the better lives we all dream of? How could we solve the problems that might just be too big for one generation to solve? Today, I'm joined by a distinguished panel of leaders and experts with deep insights into China's development and its global impact. Together, we will explore the far-reaching ideas that continue to shape China's modernization and inspire nations to follow. Here with me are Mr. Syed Hassan Javed, former Pakistan ambassador in Germany, Singapore, and Mauritius. He is also the former director of the Chinese Studies Center at the National University of Sciences and Technology in Pakistan. Martin Jack, former senior fellow at the Department of Politics and International Studies of Cambridge University. Paul Frimpong, executive director of the Africa-China Center for Policy and Advisory. Last but not least, Laura Torres de Gavidia, researcher at the Venezuelan Association of Chinese Studies at the University of Los Andes. Welcome to you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, after a morning of sessions here at the forum, what's your biggest intake? Perhaps we start with Mr. Javed.
This forum is on the changes in the century and building socialism with Chinese characteristics and the Xi Jinping thought is very appropriate and very suitable with the time that history that we and the global community finds itself. The study of socialism with Chinese characteristics have been my main passion, and especially the Chinese characteristics which make socialism here and the modernization path chosen by China and the development path and the foreign policy paradigm that China has makes it very unique model. History is taking a U-turn. But history is taking a U-turn because power is now continues to evolve and continues to shift to the east. And China-led global order is now emerging. Initiatives like Global Development Initiative, Global Security Initiative, Global Civilization Initiative, and Belt and Road Initiative, they are all aimed to build a shared future for humankind.
Mr. Zhang, what's Chinese characteristics?
Well, I think that it's been a phrase used to try and distinguish what China's doing from what the West is doing. I think that's how it first grew up. Personally, I don't think what's happened is that for a long time China was still operating on the ground of the West because the West was dominant. And this, I think, speaks largely of the reform period up until Xi Jinping. But we're in a different situation now. I mean, China has made extraordinary advances. And in foreign policy, for example, the foreign policy is very different from not just the foreign policy previously, but also unrecognizable for the West. Why? Because it's based, I think, on Chinese experience, Chinese history, Chinese concepts. And this, I think, is very exciting because it's this which is opening up new possibilities in the world for a shift in the nature of global governance.
Mr. Frimpong, what does this title, Changes Unseen in the Century, mean to you and to the Africans?
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity. I believe it's very profound and it takes us to a point of reflection and to give us opportunity to look back at what has happened, what used to be, and what's happening now. Now, as in the context of Africa, beginning of the century, of course, Ghana became the first country in Southern Africa to get independence in 1957, which is about 70 years thereabout. And so, if we look at that period, in the last century, what used to exist, post-World War II and the kind of systems that used to exist, you're talking about a period where Africa was going through the political independence struggle period. I mean, Ghana started in 1957, other countries followed. So you can imagine what that word was, in the last century before, things have changed now. I mean, China itself, as we've mentioned by previous speakers about where China was, from the century of humiliation to the opening up and the reforms in the 1978, 79. So if you juxtapose these two scenarios, where Africans was going through the independent political struggle, China's own reform and opening up, these are things that we should reflect upon to know that, okay, where the world used to converge actually shifted and it's changing. And also it gives us the chance to reflect upon these changes and ensure that these changes align with the current realities that we have in our world today.
Ms. Gavidia, what do these changes mean for the Latin Americans?
Well, I think that these kind of changes represent an opportunity to learn from. Because, and in the case of Venezuela, for example, we have still a long way to learn, to get better, to recover our economy, to just be better in general. And I think that the Chinese example is one of those where we can learn from its modernization model that does not follow a westernized model. And I think that's very important to highlight, as it teaches us that it's not the only option to follow. And perhaps Latin America in general should cover or just direct their gaze at these kind of options that exist. Because most of the people, since we're in Latin America, they tend to follow only the Western news, the westernized models. And these kind of opportunities and models and initiatives that the Chinese government has put on the global scene and arena, I think we can learn a lot from it.
Mr. Javed, you've spent a lot of time in China, right? And as you know, the 5-year plans are a very important policy and political component to Chinese modernization. And we've recently just proposed the recommendations for the 15th 5-year plan. So how do you interpret the development philosophy behind that? And what do you see as its impact to the world?
Concept of a 5-year plan that you mentioned will carry this process, and China will yet achieve another level of progress and high quality development, in which you have this growing economy, growing military power, growing soft power, which is very important. In Chinese, it's a ruan shi li. That's what defines the world, your ability to influence others. So China believes in respect and giving respect. So I think your 5-year plan is going to be in terms of eco-civilization, building eco-civilization, a great model of in terms of inclusiveness, and already you have achieved in eradicating poverty. Your model is going to be much closely studied by rest of the world.
Speaking of Chinese influence, as you may know, China has been a leader on that front. We've been proposing a lot of policies to help the world in terms of green energy, electric cars and all that.
Right.
But during that time, we've also faced a lot of criticism. People accuse China of commodity dumping, through the Belt and Road Initiative, pushing out this sense of neo-colonialism. So, Mr. Jacques, what's your response to those criticisms?
Well, on the question of global warming and so on, I think for a long time the criticism was, look, China is emitting more and more carbon dioxide, and now the situation is that it's by far the biggest emitter of carbon dioxide. So China doesn't really believe in taking responsibility for that situation. It was blamed for using coal because it's very coal, has been very coal dependent and so on. But I think that argument's now turned in a very big way, because China is clearly very concerned about environmental questions, but specifically on fossil fuels and so on. And it's now adopted a specific target in relationship to where it wants to be, which is the first time he's done something like that. But the other thing is that if you look at green technology, then China is dominant in all the 3 key areas: solar panels, wind turbines and electric vehicles. And I think the whole atmosphere now has changed in relationship to China. More and more people around the world see China as the global leader. This is an extraordinary change, I think, in a relatively short space of time.
Speaking of other people's shift on China, I recently read an article in The Economist, and I want to quote to you. It says, even if climate change is not your priority, you should be excited at the prospect of cheap, abundant, clean energy and its promise to improve billions of lives in developing countries. The world needs what China has to offer. It should take it. Now, I can clearly remember that just last year, people won't say that about China. And since you mentioned China's capability to deliver results, but to me, China has been delivering results for quite some time. So why do you think there's that shift in such short span of time?
I mean, I know this article that you're referring to in The Economist Week very recently, and it's doubtful that they would have said something like that 3 or 4 years ago. I think that it's a combination of factors, really, and a realization, in particular, that, you know, there's some incredible solar panels across northwest China, and the electric vehicles. I mean, you know, the electric vehicles are becoming a huge talking point in European societies, and certainly in my own. And this has happened over the last year or two. And there's been this suspicion about Chinese things. But the average person now says, well, you know, I look at a Chinese EV and it's very well made. It's got the latest technology. It's very well built. You know, what's wrong with it? I'm going to buy one. That was as a typical mentality. Now, that's another form of communication between China and the ordinary person in the street in a lot of European cities and so on. So I think it's a cumulative effect which is shifting the kind of the global zeitgeist, if you like, including in the West, in favor of China.
Mr. Frimpong, what does China's capacity to deliver mean for Africa and for your people? I mean, both in terms of climate issues and other issues.
Let me start with a story that will feed into how that can be demonstrated, how that has been demonstrated. So I met a local farmer in the northern part of Ghana, and he said something that stayed with me, and I still think about it. And he said that the rains are not coming as it used to, but the sun is always with us. Mm. And the sun that used to destroy what they are supposed to produce is now become a source to feed and to help them produce more even now. Mm. And this was in connection to a solar-powered irrigation system being championed in the northern part of the country, of course, implemented through UNDP, same as what happened in Ethiopia, where local smallholder farmers, through the cooperation, of course, in China and Ghana, are able to have access to solar-powered irrigation system that is now being able to help them all year round. That is a demonstration of what it means for the cooperation between Africa and China when it comes to development. Now, even taking us back to a very known Belt and Road Initiative that we know, leading to the BRI 10 years anniversary, I think China already announced that they are not financing coal projects abroad anymore. And of course, even the narrative around the BRI changed from big, huge infrastructure to small and beautiful infrastructure. Africa has been a huge beneficiary of the Belt and Road Initiative. My country, the port project that has been done as a result of BRI. Now, the demonstration here is that when you track the engagement between Africa and China, you can see China's commitment in pursuing things that they believe will be in the interest of everyone that is involved, and not just, they put in economic gains above what the environment actually needs. So, again, this is about the innovation from China, meeting some of the climatic conditions in Africa to form a solution. So usually when the sun is rather going to be the one that is going to destroy, our livelihoods, rather being combined with Chinese innovation to actually create new opportunities for us. So for me, I think that level of commitment and realization that we can leverage on what each other have to be able to meet the economic needs, but also protect the environment is very exemplary for all of us to appreciate. And hopefully there will be more opportunities for Africa and China to cooperate on the green development agenda.
Mr. Kavadia, so issues like the climate is something that requires a global response, which brings us to this concept of global governance. And I believe I'm speaking for everyone here. Right now, global governance is under threat, right? We're celebrating the 80th anniversary of the UN, but UN is being challenged on multiple fronts.
Right.
What do you see as China's role in today's global governance? And more importantly, how does China have the capability to inspire nations?
Well, I think that through the initiatives they have put together, these global initiatives, they help come together to create these spaces where, like he was saying, the BRICS, the CELAC, all these kind of spaces bring the states the opportunity to let their voices know the development needs and the perspectives of governance. And I think that these kind of groupings and initiatives are highly valuable, positive, and advantageous if taken in the right direction.
Right now, because global governance requires communication between states, and that's not happening very smoothly these days. You know, we have changes that just happen overnight. So how do you see China's development philosophies facilitate communications between different states, different cultures, and different people?
I think that the philosophy of mutual understanding is a key word in there, because if there isn't any sort of communication between each other, there won't be any mutual understanding or linear understanding at the very base. So I think that this message should be more taken into account from the state level, and just follow this kind of examples that can be done, because I know that we're in an era of protectionism, that it's more like closing doors instead of opening them up. And that's why I think that this message and initiatives of, for example, a community with a shared future is so important, as well as this shared and mutual learning and mutual understanding, which I think it's so valuable and worth mentioning through every single intervention that states might have in all these forums.
Mr. Zhang, since our friend here talks a lot about history, I want to ask you, so how do you think China's experience and knowledge from being a civilization state can help today's world in communication or just fostering cooperation?
Well, I think that China is historically so different, especially from the West. I think constituted on a very broad and deep basis. And there's a huge amount of learning, historical learning and contemporary learning as a result of that. I don't think that in any simplistic sense China's experience as a civilization state is transferable to countries that have not had that kind of history. But nonetheless, other countries can learn a lot from China in all sorts of ways. I mean, just the importance of governance, for example, the importance of the governance being a voice and expression of the people, a concept of time, of the long term. I mean, one of the things that the West has more or less completely lost, there's really been a big change. And this change, I think, is accelerating. See, now we're now in a new situation. The new situation is that the United States is no longer recognized or able to be the global hegemon. This is going to be probably about 20 years or more, 30 years, could be a very long crisis. What's the nature of that crisis? The nature of that crisis is the end of the US era, the end of the Western era, and the rise of a new era based on China and the global South. And not until that question is significantly resolved will the kind of turbulence, disruption, and instability that we're experiencing now come to an end.
Mr. Frimpong, what are the Africans learning from China right now? Like Professor Jacques just said, the civilization state, there are some things that you can learn from China and some things you can't. So what are learned?
And of course, one of them is what you mentioned about the civilization and the history of China, and of course, being the first, country from the global south to rise to the level And of course, the rise has been peaceful, mostly peaceful, as you did mention. And I think one thing that has become constant, and of course, that is being a cause of excitement for me and from Africa, and I'm sure it's gaining momentum from countries in the global south, that there's no one-fits-all solution to development, right? And for us in Africa, that you have to choose our own path of development.
Right.
That the history that you have should guide you on what kind of economic programs and policies to pursue. At the end of the day, it's about putting people at the center of your development. That's what Xi Jinping's thought is all about. Even by extension, when we talk about self-reliance, people-centered development, of course, mutual respect. Now, even on the context of some of the ideals that is being shaped, that shaping China's own path, like people-centered, self-reliance, and all, these are all even foundations of some of the key philosophy that has been a part of Africa's own journey, like the spirit of Pan-Africanism, or the foundation of Pan-Africanism, that we want self-reliance, we want territorial integrity, that we want to champion our own development. These are all the key tenets of the Pan-Africanism. There's one other philosophy called Ubuntu, I am because we are. It means that we are each other's keeper, that we need to respect each other, we need to look after each other, right? That when there's chaos here, I'm not safe. When my neighbor's house is burning, I should be going to help my neighbor than to sit aloof and think that it doesn't concern me. So I believe these are all inspirational success stories from China that can inspire. That's what it means for countries in the global south. So for me, it shows that they took their time to accept who they are, where they are, and where they want to be, and leverage on their own features and how they feel about how they want to, and then they develop what they have. So I believe these are the intersection of how it should inspire countries in the global, especially Africa, if we really want to progress to the next phase.
Yeah. Mr. Gavidi, I want to throw you this question. Mr. Frimpong talked a lot about this choices between following and choosing what suits you best.
Right.
And as we all know, there are people in this world who wants the developing countries to follow a certain path to prosperity or to progress. How would the Global South and how would you choose between these two paths, and how do you maintain your independence?
Oh, I think I agree with his idea that the characteristics of each country should follow the path that they are going to grow and follow. Because as President Xi Jinping has said, the Chinese model has worked here in China because it is modeled by Chinese thought, by its Chinese characteristics, as Mr. Jack said too. That's why we cannot just copy it without further analysis. President Xi also has said that we should not fall into automatic copying mechanism or just mechanical learning. We should be able to analyze our own context, our own history, and create thus, let's say, our own characteristics. For example, Venezuelans' characteristics that can shape the right path to us. And of course, taking lessons from all these other models that have had success at this scale. But still, I just gather the ideas of how important it is to take into account your own characteristics to make your own path and create your own independence in that way. Yes.
Could I just make one other point?
Please.
I agree with that very much. Following on from Mr. Frimpong about civilization and countries being able to choose their own course of development, I think this is really fundamental, actually. And I think the great thing about China is that China says to other countries, to the world, we're not a model for you. We are not a model for you. You have to do it your way.
Exactly.
And I think this is absolutely fundamental. And it's fundamental to the relationship between China and the Global South. Because the Global South, to feel comfortable with its relationship with China, has to feel that each country can take its own course.
Yeah.
And part of the great problem of, for example, the African continent, but well beyond the African continent, is that Western colonization robbed them of their history, robbed them of their continuity, and robbed them of their civilization. So part of the whole question of modernization for the Global South is to rediscover, renew, and connect up with their own history, their own traditions, and their own civilizations. And I think this will be a major theme of the next 50, 100 years.
Well, thank you all for being here and for all the deep insights into China's development. And as you can see, it's been a lively round of discussion and people are still trying to weigh in at the end. But this is going to be a topic that will remain for discussion for a long time to come. Our coverage continues on CGTN. Bye now and take care.
We all enter this world with the universal greeting. We then learn to speak.
Bonjour, comment allez-vous?
Hoy estoy muy contenta.
Though our languages, cultures, and traditions may differ, we still share one thing in common. We have hope for humanity and the world.
Donated an additional
German
500,000
railway company Deutsche
Director of the
the
International
26th
Monetary
United
Fund,
Nations
Krista
Climate
Lita.
Hear the difference. Join our global network to connect with the world.